Welcome to Season 2 of the Empower to Heal podcast. I'm your host, Dina Tipsherini, and I'm so excited to take you on a journey through the ups and downs of motherhood. Together, we are going to learn, prepare for, and unearth all things motherhood, because I believe that exposure and awareness can lead to empowerment. So buckle up for an unfiltered, raw, and insightful journey. Hello and welcome back to the Empower to Heal podcast. Today we have a special guest, Ursula, who is someone that I just recently met and immediately jived with. I want to tell you a little bit about her and share her bio and then introduce her. So Ursula is not only a certified birth educator, she is also a full spectrum doula and a birth assistant and a doula trainer. So she has all of this experience. I know the first time that I heard the word full spectrum doula, I was like, what in the world is that? So we're going to learn from her today what that entails, because I only thought there was one type of doula. It's not true. So Ursula has been married to her husband, David, for 30 years. She has 2 grown sons, a daughter-in-law, and she's soon to be a grandmother. What an exciting milestone. So Ursula is known for her easy laughter, her radiant energy, and the knowledge of birthing women. And to say she's an inspiration is an understatement. If you guys hear this and absolutely love what you're listening to, pop on over to YouTube, because when you see Ursula and you see her energy and her light, you're going to be hooked, just like I was. Through her years of work, Ursula has developed an intuitive approach to working with her peers, other professionals, and her clients. She's a true believer in honoring your body and the natural process, yet she also respects the medical need for intervention when appropriate. Ursula not only inspires her clients to better understand how their choices affect their well-being, but she takes the mind-body connection to a whole new level with her practice as a birth worker. Now, she's got over 25 years of practice in this field, and she's worked with over 5,000 families and attended over 1,500 births. And it's with this passion that she runs her business called Birth You Desire. Birth You Desire is a collaborative practice in the Phoenix area, but it started in the DC metro area, and it embodies over 300 years of birth work and has serviced over thousands of families locally, nationally, and internationally. Welcome, Ursula. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be great fun today.
It really is. So you are an expert around doulas. Not only are you a doula, but you train and you have a whole workforce of doulas out doing good work. Can you share
Yes.
with us, what is that? What is a doula and what is a full spectrum doula?
So when most people hear of a doula, they either think specifically of a birth doula. So that would be somebody who works with somebody once they're pregnant through their entire pregnancy, is present at the birth, and gets them started on their postpartum journey. Or they think of a postpartum doula, which is somebody who comes in after the baby's born and then takes them through that transitional period, which, is basically at least that first year. It could be much longer, as you and your clients are aware.
Mm-hmm.
The term full spectrum doula is that and more. It's also focusing around loss. So supporting families who are having miscarriages or they're having stillbirths, but it is also assisting and helping families with their fertility choices, getting pregnant, and understanding what their options are for a healthy, viable pregnancy, as well as a pregnancy that may not unfold the way they had originally dreamed.
Yes. I know when I first met my first doula, she was actually our yoga instructor in our prenatal yoga class that we were taking. And that was my first introduction to what even is a doula. And from there, every doula that I have met feels like a heart match for me, like somebody who lives life in this really intentional, centered way that embodies connection. And I feel like you truly embody that.
I appreciate that. And I think it's really important that when people are looking for doulas or interviewing doulas, they're not just looking at the price point, they're not just looking at the skill set, but they need to really look for that energy match, because you're moving into a very acute state with a lot of emotions and a lot of things happening. And if you don't feel that warm hug, or if you don't feel safe with that individual, then they're not going to help you to have the outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, and I met you at a birth worker meetup and or like it's an you guys have it regularly, but you put these on, right? Like you create
Yep.
this space, this opportunity for birth workers to come together, and immediately I felt your magnetic energy. You have this like essence about you that feels like you are knowledgeable, you're the expert in the room, but you're also warm and welcoming, and it creates this level playing field. And I think that's really powerful when you're interviewing somebody for like who's going to help you in one of the most vulnerable times of your entire life. And to know that you head up your whole agency in that way is powerful.
And that's what I look for when I'm looking to bring somebody in the agency is I'm looking for that nurturing, good
Yes.
communication expertise, not just the skill set, but they communication is the foundation.
Yes.
If we can't communicate, we're going to struggle.
Yes. Yeah. I talk about my doula on here a lot, and I don't even know if she knows, but her name is Darcy. And she was a human that I knew I didn't have to say everything to because she could read a room and she could read my energy and she knew where to insert herself and how. And that showed up in the way of when I was laboring at home. It was silent in our house. Like you could hear a pin drop. I was doing hypnobirthing. And so I was like really zoned in, just me on my hands and knees, like laboring through these surges. And she knew exactly where to push on my body to relieve pain. She didn't ask 1,000 questions. She wasn't like trying to assess everything out loud. Like she followed her intuition. And you could tell that her training and her ability to connect on that level was out of this world. So, like when doulas get trained, it's more than just you're learning the material, but it's learning how to actually connect. Tell us about how Birth You Desire does that. So, are you on the brink of parenthood, eagerly anticipating the arrival of your little one? Take a proactive step towards preparing for the whirlwind journey ahead by joining our waitlist for the Empowered First Year Postpartum Prep course. Designed with your needs in mind, this online 4-week program offers a comprehensive blend of education, skill building, and community support to guide you through the demanding postpartum season. Don't navigate this transformative time alone. Click the link in the show notes below to join our next cohort and embark on your journey to parenthood with confidence.
So we do that a couple of different ways. And I think the very first thing to bring forth is that I consider us a concierge service in that we want to take you from the first step all the way to the end where you don't have to go online to Dr. Google and get poor information, or you don't have to shop around for the best possible people to work with. My intention is to bring that to you and reduce your stress load. And that's also part of the purpose of the birth worker meetings where we met was to develop the resources and all the referrals outside of in-house out of house so that when somebody needs a service that we can't fulfill, we do have that vetted network for them. So I think that is the very first thing. And then I think the second thing that really makes us unique outside of, 5,000 clients in 25 years and all of that is our approach. And our approach is that you are in charge of your birth. This is your birth, your body, and your baby. And our ego, our intentions, our expectations have no place at your birth because this is your event. And so we're supposed to take your goals and assume them as if they're our own and then work within that. And that's
Mm.
reading the room like Darcy did with you, with
Mhm.
knowing that you needed quiet for your focus and yet having that knowledge of the birthing body. So you know, oh, there's probably pain here. This is how we can alleviate that pain. Or she's requesting something and then stepping into that space. The the learning, the holding space is something that you learn over time, but definitely some people are more attuned
Mhm.
to that than others.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. I love how you said that. Some are more attuned to it. And I don't think I've met a doula out there who isn't attuned to it. Like they have put so much effort forward to make that a priority in their care. And that to me speaks volumes. Like when I first I was in that yoga class and I learned what a doula was. That was after my gynecologist had essentially referred me out. I felt like she fired me because I wanted a more natural birth. I didn't want to be poked. I didn't want an IV. And she sent me to a midwife group. And through the midwife group, it still felt very medical, but they were willing to honor that I didn't want the IV. And then when I learned about doulas, I was like, oh, like this is the next level of somebody who's going to be there for me. And a word that comes to mind for a doula is also an advocate. Somebody who can speak for you and know your wishes that you have already prepared for with before being in your birthing space or around medical professionals who want that information from you. And they have your permission to advocate and speak and share when you literally like may not be able to.
And so that advocacy is such an important part, because just like there's a way to read the room and be in that space, there is a way to advocate depending on who the provider is and who that space is.
Yes.
So, it can be something as simple as, hey, Nurse Jane, have you noticed that every time she's on her left side, the baby doesn't like that? Maybe we should put her on her right side. What do you think? To, hey, Dina, it looks like you're a little confused with the information the provider gave you. What questions do you have? Do you want me to explain it to you in lay language? And just helping you to find your voice and to be able to say, yes, this is something I want. No, I don't. Or I just need space. Give me space right now. And then I can see what happens, or I can make a decision.
Yes.
Um, it's a very unique role, and nobody goes into this business to make money. Like, we go into this business to empower other families, to help them to have the best possible outcomes. And yeah, we have childcare and gas, and there's a fee assigned to that, but there's no fee that can be assigned to being on call 24 hours a day, or being up for 24 hours straight, or having to leave your kid at their birthday party to go to a client that you've committed to. Um, it's just a different level of dedication. Like you said, the people who go into this work are going into it with a passion and a desire, and that comes across in the work they do.
Mhm. Heck yes. It definitely does. I want to go off on a little tangent here because you said something that just like made
Yeah,
my brain go. And it was how you advocate matters. Because I know not every hospital feels open to the
yeah,
idea of having a doula present. You have a right to
correct,
have them, but they also may not be easy to work with.
correct.
And there's like this dance of, for me, I had to birth at a specific hospital because that's where the practice that I was at. And there's like this dance of maintaining that relationship so that you can have both. You can have your hospital team that's like assigned to you because of where you go to the doctor, and you can have your birth worker present who you feel like you've spent umpteenth amount of like meetings planning and preparing for this experience present as well. And how you advocate matters because sometimes those two don't jive, right? It's
They, they
true.
don't they don't drive, and part of it is, um, you're even for myself, I'm a highly experienced, proficient doula. If I go into a labor and delivery room and that provider had a negative experience
Mhm.
previously,
Yeah.
I'm only as good as the previous experience,
Mm.
independent of who I am or my skill set. So part of the doula's job is not just communication with the patient or the client, it is communication with the team. It is setting the space. It's, hi, Nurse Dina, I'm Ursula the doula. I'm here to make your life easier, not harder. These are the things I can do. Like, what are you comfortable with? The doula's job, the way I think about it, is our job is to bridge between a live, healthy mother and baby at the end of the event. And our job is to bridge that experience. So it's everything the client wants and dreams and their wishes and their goals, and helping them to get to that end point of having a live, healthy baby and being live and healthy themselves. that space is the space that medicine does not take care of. The nurses don't have times, the doctors don't have times, even the midwives. It's a matter of balancing everything else that's going on. They want to do it, they just might not have the capacity with everything else. The doula is there, they're dedicated, they're there for you. They're
Yes.
not dealing with everything else that everybody else is.
Yes. And I think that relationship to foster that as a doula agency at the hospitals that you guys are connected to, like
Yes.
what an important piece of the job so that birthers, like people like me and my husband, can feel confident that this isn't going to go sideways.
Yes.
This is going to be an easy, seamless transition if a hospital birth is what we choose.
Right.
Yeah. So back to that moment of when I was afraid to get an IV. I want to speak to like this focus that we have on birth and the fear that a lot of us innately have because of our how we were raised in how we view birth as something extremely painful.
We do.
I know that for me, my choice to not want to have an IV was because I was afraid of needles, because I'm afraid of the pain of needles. Like that goes way back into my childhood, right? Like forever, Dina has not liked needles, right? And so I was like, like you're not going to hook me up to a needle. You're not sticking a needle in my back. Like none of this is happening. Absolutely not. I do not want that kind of pain, even if it's pain to not have pain, like I'm not welcoming it. And when you and I were meeting, we had a lovely, delicious, like pastry meeting and enjoyed some really scrumptious pastries. Um, we were talking about pain and how you teach this like concept of three different types of pain. And
Mhm.
I would love for you to teach us that today on the podcast and
Sure.
share with us, because I'm not the only one who's afraid of the pain. Like so many of us are, the majority of us.
And so let's first start with pain. And in medicine, a lot of things are done by acronyms. So let's just start with the acronym PAIN, because I think this is really helpful for a lot of people. Individuals who are choosing to have natural childbirth or reduced interventions believe that pain is purposeful. It has a purpose. It teaches us where to move, what's going on in our bodies, what's going on with the baby. Pain is also anticipatory. So when you're anxious, when you're worried, when you're in a foreign environment, when you don't have the people with you that you were expecting, it can amp up your anxiety and it can cause you to anticipate versus relaxing and embracing it. The I is for intermittent. So pain, contractions, surges are much like ocean waves. If you think about ocean waves on the beach, they come in, they peak and crash, and then they fade. They come in, they peak, they crash, they fade. If we can stay in that faded space and not stay in that peaked space, it's much easier to deal with what we're feeling. And then N is for normal. Like this is a normal process. If it wasn't supposed to have this biofeedback in it that we call pain, it wouldn't exist, right?
Mm,
So if we can think about pain as being purposeful, anticipatory, intermittent, and natural or normal, then it's much easier to embrace it, to think about it, to develop skill sets around it. So to answer your question, I think about pain is three different ways. The first type of pain you actually brought up beautifully, which is emotional pain, which is fear of the unknown. Like fear is primitive. It takes over everything. Our muscles tense, our breathing changes, our body releases hormones. And when that happens, our sensory focus becomes very limiting. You did that in labor, right? You were doing hypnobirthing, you were on hands and knees, and you went into this cave, you went into this space. And when anybody goes into this space, part of what happens is we also lose our ability to think and to verbalize.
mm,
Our communication actually decreases, our skill set decreases a little bit. And that makes it really important to have somebody around you
yes.
to give you that buffer. And your partner, your doula, okay? Um, The other thing about like emotional pain is that the desire to survive is hardwired. And it's hardwired, but it's also influenced by everything we see around us. So the stories our mothers tell us, what we see on mass media, TV, the movies, the stories we read. Like nobody goes out there and says, "Oh, I had this beautiful birth. Let me tell you all about it." And if they do, there's much fewer of those stories versus, "Oh, let me tell you how horrible it was. Let me tell you how bad it was, like how much painful it was." And so we hear all these negative pain, 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 scary, foreign. We don't get to hear the, "I could do it. It was embraceable. It was doable. I was able to hold my baby." Instead, we hear everything else and think that just sort of builds in this emotional pain. So before we move on, like I'd like to just point out like reading stories, talking to your friends, watching birth videos on YouTube, Instagram, whatever that might be, developing a team that you trust, taking a class so you and your partner are on the same page, having a doula like Darcy, like myself, to hold that space for you, or even a sister, a brother, a child if you're old enough. But being able to having someone that you feel safe enough that who can turn to you and say to you, "Dina, what are you worried about right now? What are you
Mm-hmm.
scared about?" And
Mm-hmm.
then you trust in them enough to bring it forth so that it can leave the space.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I think a piece of that that really helped me around being able to get to the hypnobirthing mindset is intentionally watching births that were beautiful and
Yes.
peaceful, like
Yes.
reprogramming my mindset around birth. Because previous to that, like I had to intentionally search that out because previously, like all the things I see are women like gripping in pain, screaming and cursing and yelling, and people being afraid of them, and like these big outbursts of moments that defined to me the depth of pain that I was about to go into.
Yeah.
And watching videos of people breathing their babies out and breathing with the surges and like finding the primitive space inside them to grunt and like let the guttural pieces come out in a natural way throughout the breathing was so eye-opening to me to witness like no, birth can look completely opposite than what it has been portrayed. And that reprogramming opened my eyes to a new vision to hold myself in, right? Like I could see myself in that woman breathing her baby out. And so as I am in the zone, like me and my baby work in perfect harmony. My baby is the perfect size for my body, like doing my mantras, breathing through the surges, like keeping my brain focused. I could have this vision of this mom that I watched on YouTube breathe her baby out. And it's like
Mhm.
a whole new reference point,
It
which I
is.
think really shaped for me how I managed through that pain.
So you said a lot of beautiful things that that can be really powerful for other people. And I think the very first thing is you chose when you watch those videos to put yourself in their shoes and embrace that story. And you went back to that at your birth using your mantra, using your breathing, using your grunting, having feeling safe enough in your environment and the people that you were with that you could make those kinds of noises
Mhm.
and trust yourself to do so.
Mhm.
Um, Diaphragmic breath, breathing, grunting, making what we call round sounds are all things that help to work with the contractions versus screaming. So a really easy way to like explain that is if you're in the bathroom trying to have a bowel movement, and let's say you're constipated, are you screaming as it's coming out or are you grunting as it comes out? And it's not the same thing, but it's a similar concept. So if you make what we call high noises, I, e, versus oh, ah,
Mhm.
round sounds,
Mhm.
your throat and your vagina are connected, and the sounds that you make are replicated in your bottom. So people think it's normal to scream because that's what's on TV, but screaming actually makes it more painful. And
Mhm.
then that starts a cascade of sensations and fear and anxiety that can just literally roll down the hill and get out of control.
Wow.
So, again, having that space, having the people around you to give you the freedom to do those things is
Yep.
very powerful.
I remember in the yoga classes, they would have us. So I was like third trimester, super big belly, feeling out of balance already because I was very like front heavy, right? And they would have us do a squat and they would have us hold the squat for a minute with this mindset of smile on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're smiling on your face, you're like relaxing and communicating
Uh-huh.
that down to your pelvic area, like
Yep,
everything's gonna relax. And then thinking to myself, you can do anything for a minute. You can
you
do
can.
anything for a minute. And that was like that was such a good practice for me for the surges. I call them surges. That's what they teach us in hypnobirthing rather than contractions. Because contractions has you already have a perception around that word. And so, like, renaming things to not have a scary name so that you can build a new relationship with those names was a
Yep.
part of the hypnobirthing classes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that was such a foundational piece of like connecting the smile on your face to relaxing and allowing that pelvic bowl, right? Like everything to shift and open and relax too. When I learned that, I was like, that's brilliant. And they even carried around a skeletal like pelvis
Pelvis.
in the class so that you could see what they were talking about, which was really, really cool.
So if we take that squat that you were in, practicing that breathing work, there is sensations. Your muscles will strain. There will be some trembling. There will be some intensity around holding that squat for a minute,
Yes.
just like labor, right? So the contraction, the surge, the wave, there's multiple names, lasts about a minute, just like that squat did. The difference with physiological pain in labor is that there's two participants. So there's you as the host body, and then there's the baby.
Mm,
And when the baby is in a very specific position, or when the baby is twisted or tucked, or maybe not in the ideal position, that can increase the amount of physiological pain that you're in. So that is a place where having a doula or a really skilled midwife, or even just happen to have a free nurse around who has, the training around those kinds of positions, we can put you in different positions to help the baby in that pelvis to work like a key and a lock. We can change your breathing pattern and remind you to put a smile on your face. We can get you upright and use gravity to open that pelvis up to get the baby to move through that space, as well as when it's time to rest, and there's plenty of time to rest in labor, like what is the most comfortable position or the most beneficial position for that mother baby dyad to get into. And my favorite thing is in all of those things, as much as we have a smile on our face, is to also remind the birthing person to be like a wet doodle, to be like a rag dog, to just relax and not hold the tension in their bottom, to not hold the tension in their throat, to not make those high pitched noises, and instead do that deep breathing and the grunts and the groans and the ahs and the ohs, which help to make space for the baby to come out.
yes. I really appreciate you pointing out like there's two bodies that contribute to this
Yeah.
physical pain because I remember my son, I was told numerous times, he's like, we've got to, I was sent to the Spinning Babies website or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
Like, we've got to get your baby in a different position. We've got to get your baby to move and shift. And I would like, it just seems bonkers because you think of this huge belly, and I would have like my knees up on the side of the bed and my hands
And the forward
down, like over trying to move the baby in a different position. And when I was in labor, my doula had me go down our steps head first to try and get the baby in a different position. She did this thing where she put this cloth under my belly and lifted it
and
up,
left it.
which just that was wonderful. But then she like shimmied it, like she
Mhm.
shook it a little bit.
It's called the shimmy.
And oh my God, it felt so good to like move and take the pressure off because I had all back labor due to this position that he was in. And then in the hospital, she was the one who said, like, I got in the tub and I was only in there for like a hot second before I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom. I gotta go. And she was like, it's okay. Like, you can go to the bathroom in the tub. I was like, heck no. Like, I'm going to the toilet. And she's like, okay. But she had me go down the steps of the tub at the hospital head first. And I think it was that last inversion that I did that finally got his little chin where it needed to be so that he could travel through the birth canal and out successfully. And she's the one that suggested all of those things. There wasn't a medical provider that was suggesting that. And so I felt like that was an invaluable tool and knowledge to have that you don't have to have. Like there was people telling me stories like, oh, if your baby's in the wrong position, like they'll just move your baby like using their hands on the outside of your stomach, or they'll go inside and like shift. And so I'm so grateful I had an educated human
And
in the
those
room
techniques
to
don't
try.
always work, right?
Yeah.
Like doulas are experts in the third type of pain, which is functional pain, when things are not unfolding normally. And sometimes we know that ahead of time. Your baby's posterior. Let's work on these spinning babies exercises. And we're using spinning babies because they're the first one to sort of put them in a package. But let's do these series of exercises to get your baby in a better position before labor starts, because then we can reduce the amount of time that you're in labor by 20-25%. And we can decrease the amount or the intensity of what you're going to feel by the same amount, 20-25%. So that's postures and positions in pregnancy, that's postures and positions in labor, that's also postures after birth to get your body to open back up and to find its space again. Um, it's also knowing when to refer out again. Like, when would it be appropriate to see an acupuncturist, a chiropractor, a body worker, a physical therapist, again, depending on the client. Using things like the rebozo or a shawl or a scarf to lift that belly, to do that shimmy, to work in tandem to get the baby to move. I think probably one of the best things a doula can do is, besides stay in your room and be that constant support person, is they can remind you that what you're going through is finite. Even though it doesn't feel like it's going to end, it will end at some point in time. It's just a matter of working with the process, surrendering into the process, trusting the process, the provider, your place, your options, your partner, your baby. You got going back to that dyad, like the two of you have to work together. You are a partnership and you have to trust each other as well.
And it's so much easier to get to that state of emotional trust, to work through that emotional pain when you've built a relationship,
Yeah.
either communicated and planned this with your partner ahead of time, taken the classes, hired the doula, like having access to this before you're at your delivery room, right? So that you truly have this. So many people are not aware what a doula is. I was not. I was just going to take the run of the mill birth class that the colleague that I work with was taking, where they teach you and they show you the instruments that they might have to use on you. And I was just going to go do that, tour the hospital, and show up for like, all right, let's do this, right? Like, I'm afraid, don't poke me. That's the rule. Let's go. And if I hadn't have followed the sparkly breadcrumbs throughout my like life, these are just little interactions, right? Like someone suggesting to go to prenatal yoga, having a doula be the instructor, or like the person who painted our house was like, "Oh, my wife just did hypnobirthing." And I was like, "What's that?" Like all of these little breadcrumbs, listening to this podcast. these
Yeah,
are ways for you to recognize like we actually have choices here in America of what we can do and how we can proceed. And I want to get to this in a minute. I'd love for you to share how Birth You Desire helps create accessibility to hiring a doula, because I think that's important. But before we get there, I want to be able to continue wrapping up this discussion around the pain, the three different types of pain. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard functional pain, physical pain, and emotional pain.
correct.
And being able to like enter into this experience with a different mindset and prepared around an
Mhm.
understanding of these types of pains and what we can do to mitigate or mitigate through mindset, mitigate through partnership and advocacy and support
Yes,
system, and mitigate through like you becoming attuned with your own body and being able to listen and connect with that
yes.
to support you entering into childbirth without this immense fear that so many of us have.
And are told that exists.
Yeah.
Like that is one thing for your individuals that are listening to this podcast who are like, oh, I'm not going to have another baby. Great, fine. But please make sure that the stories that you're telling, the stories that you're telling your child, the stories that you're telling the woman at Starbucks, the stories that you're telling to the house painter, right? Or in yoga class, make sure those stories are empowering stories and you're not fear mongering and you're not piling onto this very fragile pregnant person who's overwhelmed and hormonal and sleep deprived and scared. Let's lift each other up versus push each other down.
Yeah. And so people listening to this might be like, cool, this is wonderful. Rich people can access this. But I wasn't rich when I accessed hiring a doula. I hired a doula that had a sliding fee that
Mm-hmm.
allowed us to be able to hire her. Um, And I know that throughout America, there's different initiatives to
Mm-hmm.
support access and care to hiring birth workers or support team or a doula.
Yep. Yep.
How does Birth You Desire navigate meeting the needs of the community and being available? Motherhood is a beautiful journey, but it can also be overwhelming. Do you often find yourself feeling isolated, struggling to find balance, and yearning for a sense of identity beyond mom? Trust me, you're not alone. Join the Empowered Mamas Club, where you'll discover a supportive community of like minded mothers. Gain valuable skills to navigate those highs and lows of motherhood, reclaim your sense of self, and become the engaged and present mom that you desire so that you can create cherished moments with your little ones. It's time to prioritize your well being and rediscover the joy in motherhood. Click the link in the show notes and join us in the Empowered Mamas Club today.
So
And accessible.
we we have a multifaceted approach. The first thing is that we offer different payment options, including we're set up as a pregnancy care facility, meaning that we can take flex funding, so FSA, HSA accounts, and use your pre-tax dollars for this. We also take credit cards. We have payment plans. We do have a sliding scale for some clients. There's also a whole bunch of new insurances out there, Carrot, other ones that are out there that are helping to cover some of these services and understand the importance of them, including Medicaid and Medicare are now starting to be covered, or at least covering portions. If you're in the military, TRICARE does the same. But we also have something in house, and we have something in house where individuals are welcome to give us a donation towards a kitty that we hold in house for when we get a client who needs pro bono services or needs sliding scale. And we use those funds to make sure that the doula's expenses are covered so that we can then give back to the community. So that's the first way we give back to the community. The other way is one of my things that's near and dear to my heart is I support individuals that are going through miscarriage and loss at pro bono or at very low cost fees, because that's a time and a place where you did not expect to be. And just as it's important to reframe the actual birth, it's also important to reframe those moments so that you can have closure and healing around them. So there's a variety of different things that we do. And if there's somebody on this podcast that's, done having children and loves this idea, like reach out to Dina, reach out to me. We would be happy to include whatever you want to give us towards that kitty because we just depleted that kitty. We just took another pro bono client, and that
Oh,
kitty at this moment is empty, but it is something that we actively work on.
I adore that. I think it's so important for us to have community organizations that are willing to create ways to have funds for people who can't otherwise afford doula services. There was something that you shared too that I think is just, I want to highlight in that if you are trying to get pregnant and having a hard time, you don't have to wait to be pregnant to hire a doula. Like the fact that you have education, experience, and ability to support people, parents who are working to build their family is so powerful because the nature of a doula just aligns so well with that, right? Like, oh, it's
It's
amazing.
easy. We offer free discovery calls. So I'll give you 3 minutes of my time to talk about whatever's going on in your life, in your situation, in your fertility journey to help you to understand what your options are. We also do 1 and 2 hour consultations. So you want the knowledge of the doula, but your partner may not want to have an extra person in the room, or they really want to have the mother there and not the doula. So maybe they want to do a quick conversation about skill set and techniques and things to learn.
Mm.
There's a lot of different ways to gain this knowledge. The easiest one for the pregnant family is to have somebody bedside. But if that's not a possibility, there's all kinds of other options.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Like,
Yeah.
if you wanted to have someone in the room who doesn't have this education and expertise, like having a call where they can learn some of that, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. That's pretty cool. I also think that there's this piece of the puzzle of the support that a doula provides is such an emotional, like a deep emotional connection attached to the education. It's not like signing up for a class and going and taking a class. It's not like reading a book. It's like there's this depth in it that allows you to feel heard and held and seen for all that you've gone through. And then the education that follows is catered and tailored specifically to your own experiences
Yeah.
so that you can walk away with that depth and how it particularly applies to you in your circumstance. And that is irreplaceable. Like a class isn't going to do that. A book is not going to do that.
Nope.
That's beautiful.
But the next step is that skills that you learn, you can then apply to other parts of your life. You can apply it to your pediatrician conversation. You can apply it to
Yes.
buying a car. You could apply it to, picking a school, right? It's
Yes.
that advocacy. It's learning how to ask questions. It's finding your voice. It's recognizing what's important to you and being able to speak that.
Yes. You're just reminding me, we have this woman here in the valley who she's called your real estate doula. And she takes like the concept of a doula and like what a doula is in action and applies it to real estate. So she helps you with buying a home with the feel of like a doula. I was like, you're so
Awesome.
brilliant. Like,
Yep. That's
oh,
great. That's
I love
great.
it. I know. Okay, Ursula. So, how do people find Birth You Desire? So, I know here in the Valley, you are growing. Like, how do we access you? How do we find you? Most of the listeners are here in Arizona.
Not a problem. So our website is Birth You Desire. And then to make this really easy for about everyone, our Instagram is Birth You Desire. Our Facebook is Birth You Desire. Our Pinterest is Birth You Desire. So you can find us anywhere under Birth You Desire. On our website, you can see all the services we offer. You can see who's on the team. That team is growing and changing. And again, we cover the entire Phoenix metropolitan area. And reach out because, even if you don't think you're within that range, your definition and my definition might be different, and we might be able to help you out anyway. Or at the very least, if we can't help you, we'll help you to find somebody who can help you.
Yes, I love that. And that last piece, like, will help you find someone that can help you. I'm becoming more and more aware of like access to funds through health insurance that you may not know you have. So there's like the
Yes.
HSA and the FSA, but there's also a lot of businesses that offer certain resources at reduced cost. And so being able to like know to delve into and ask these questions can be helpful. If you're listening to this and you're curious, like knowing what questions to ask or the words to say doula or birth worker support when you call your health insurance number to figure out what those are, or you talk to your representative at whatever organization you work at, can be really helpful. And I think that you mentioned too, like postpartum, like you do the postpartum doula preparations and
Yeah.
support, but that piece of like, what are your rights where you live? For caring for your infant and feeding your infant and you're returning to work and how can
Mhm.
you between you and your partner organize and arrange your funds and times of how you use these resources you may not even be aware of because you don't know how to ask for them so that you can plan accordingly. You have access and knowledge
Mhm.
around all of that?
We do. And again, what we don't have the exact information around, we can help to point you in the right direction. I will point out for your listeners, if you work for a bigger company, Carrot and Clio is something that a lot of companies are now partnering with, and they offer doula services and doula reimbursement for birth and postpartum doulas. So that is a great opportunity. That's this new thing that's happening, as well as, like I said, TRICARE for the military, Medicaid. There's a lot really happening right now in the birth world. The community, the medical establishment has finally seen the light. They see the numbers. They realize that having a doula can improve the entire family's mental and physical health, the baby, the partner, the birthing person, all of them. And so there's greater awareness around this right now. And so use it, people.
Yes.
The, share the word, tell everybody there's some great opportunities out there.
Yes. If you don't have access to those resources, but you're planning on having a shower, a baby shower, there's this really, if you listen to a previous episode with Be Her Village on the podcast, there's this amazing website platform where you don't pay anything. You build your registry of service providers for the
Yep.
services that you know you might need or that you want, like doulas or like a massage therapist or a lactation consultant or a therapist or a coach, whatever it is. You build that out on their platform and you have that as a registry. So you have your gift registry, but you also have your service registry. So all of these people in your community that want to support you, that are spending thousands of dollars each baby can focus on how you want that spent. So you're not just getting a bunch of onesies. Instead, you're like, oh no, like we're good on the onesies. We could really use a doula. The money can go into there and you get all of the funds. They don't take a portion of the funds. You get them. The person who's going in and adding the money will pay the percentage for the platform. So you get the full amount that you are posting on there when it's gifted to you by your friends and family. So that's another way to access funds for a doula, which is I just think it's beautiful and easy and seamless.
And it's a great way for somebody who may not feel comfortable saying, hey, I don't need more lenses. I really need pregnancy massage. I need a doula. It's
Yes.
a really easy way for somebody to speak up and share what their needs really are, especially if we're
Yes.
looking at like a sprinkle or a second baby or,
Yeah,
different situations.
absolutely. Well, Ursula, it has been such a joy having you on the podcast. Thank you for teaching us about pain and the three different types of pain and showing us all about what your company, Birth You Desire, is about. I'm excited to get the word out there around what you can offer here in Arizona because I know you're huge in DC, but here in Arizona in particular as you're growing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate this. And I hope everybody who's listening has a great day.